Let's begin with the foundations. Welcome to another lecture. Today we examine with some care and a touch of dry curiosity the career and life chronology of Bonnie Tyler, born Gaynor Hopkins in June 1951 in Skewen, Wales. A singer whose voice, repertoire choices, and market strategies produced one of the most recognizable sounds in late 20th century popular music. I am Alexei, thank you for joining us.
Hi, I'm Priyanka. I'm looking forward to this, especially how a voice can become a strategy, not just a sound.
To frame our discussion, in simple terms, we are telling the story of a Welsh chapel singer who, through a series of name changes, a faithful vocal cord operation, and shrewd alignments with producers and markets, became a global icon of the power ballad. In more technical terms, we are analyzing an interplay among vocal timbre transformation, brand identity construction, production networks from RCA and CBS to Hansa BMG, and cross-territorial market segmentation that sustained a 5-decade career across shifting media eras. It is, if you will, a case study in how artistic contingency meets industrial strategy.
So, I guess we can start by thinking about terms. When we say timbre here, we mean that grainy, raspy quality that listeners compare to Rod Stewart or Kim Carnes. And when we say A&R, or producer pivot, we mean those intentional choices to match a voice with writers like Jim Steinman or Dieter Bohlen in different decades. Right.
Exactly. And it's important to understand that these choices are not merely aesthetic. They position songs within radio formats, television cycles such as MTV in the 1980s, and later streaming-era catalog revivals linked to events. The stakes are straightforward. Understanding Tyler clarifies the evolution of pop and rock from country pop crossover to operatic rock spectacle, to Europop optimization, to 21st century nostalgia mechanics. A frequent misunderstanding centers on her surgery. The widely reported scream during post-operative recovery is part of the lore. Medically, the precise causality of the resulting husk is debated. Empirically, however, the voice we hear after 1977 is audibly different and, crucially, commercially catalytic.
I think the next thing we should talk about is the basics. She was Gaynor Hopkins, then Shireen Davis fronting Imagination, and finally, Bonnie Tyler. She chose the last name from newspaper lists, with RCA's encouragement to make it memorable for international audiences. And the voice, after surgery in 1977, became that dramatic rasp we now associate with the big choruses.
Let's start with the history. Born June 1951, Skewen Neath, raised in a religious household, first public singing in chapel. By 1969, she is on the local circuit, placed second in a talent competition, works backing Bobby Wayne and forms Imagination as Shireen Davis. In 1975, RCA signs her. Debut single My, Honeycomb stalls, but the label executes an audacious press junket for Lost in France in 1976, flying journalist to Le Touquet, which yields a UK top 10 and her first Top of the Pops appearance. In spring 1977, she has nodules removed. Thereafter, we hear the newly husky instrument on singles like It's a Heartache, released November 1977, which reaches number 4 in the UK and number 3 in the US and sells in the millions.
Building on that, Natural Force goes gold in the US in 1978. She tours America with Tom Jones. Then, after frustrations with RCA's country direction, she leaves by 1981. The pivot is to CBS and Jim Steinman, and that is where the word Wagnerian starts to make sense for pop. Right.
Indeed. In late 1982, sessions at the power station with E Street adjacent players. February 1983, Total Eclipse of the Heart arrives. a Steinman showpiece described as a Wagnerian onslaught of emotion. Worldwide sales are reported above 13 million, and the companion album, Faster Than the Speed of Night, debuts at #1 in the UK and top 5 in the US. The 1984 Footloose contribution, Holding Out for a Hero, further codifies her as the adrenalized balladeer of the MTV age. 1985 brings Marauder's Metropolis project and a Grammy nomination for Here She Comes. Secret Dreams and Forbidden Fire lands in 1986 with visually ambitious videos. She collaborates beyond that universe as well. Mike Oldfield in 1987, and on Hide Your Heart in 1988, she records songs that later become major hits for other artists, including The Best.
To shift gears a bit. In the 1990s, she optimizes for mainland Europe with Hansa. Bitter Blue in 1991 is a phenomenon in Norway and Austria, with 11 weeks at #1 in Norway and multi-platinum, even though the album never comes out in the UK or US. Then Angel Heart and Silhouette in Red extend that run, with awards like the Gold Ena Europa and an Echo. Later, she returns to a broader international palette with Free Spirit in 1995. And in the 2000s, she reframes the catalogue through bilingual duets, especially Si Demain, Turnaround, with Karine Anton topping France for 10 weeks in 2003-2004.
As we continue, the 2010s show a veteran artist leveraging television, tours, and high-visibility moments. Eurovision 2013 with Believe in Me, a well-documented solar eclipse performance of Total Eclipse of the Heart in 2017, causing a digital sales spike. A return to working with David McKay on Between the Earth and the Stars in 2019, and archival projects such as the RCA years. Alongside, there is sustained philanthropy via charity supergroups and children's health causes in Wales. In 2022, she is appointed MBE. Notably, she finally tours South America. In 2024, a live album, In Berlin, arrives. In 2025, she bridges generations with Together, produced by David Guetta and Hypaton, reaching the French airplay top 5. In 2026, new material continues with Only Love premiered in London. She died in July 2026. Her legacy includes 2 of the best-selling singles in history and a voice that critics at AllMusic called inimitable and wonderfully gritty. Before we get to the complexities, a brief personal note. As a student revising late at night with a temperamental cassette deck, I once flipped a tape and found Total Eclipse of the Heart mid-chorus. Mathematically, the dynamics were absurd. Emotionally, they were inevitable. It is worth noting how quickly one recognizes that voice. This brings us to our larger questions. Let's transition to another aspect. We will examine 3 questions. First, historically, how did the post-surgery vocal change affect trajectory? Second, counterfactually, what if the voice had not changed? Third, in the present, how is her legacy perceived, and where is further research needed? Big question 1. Historically, the vocal change functions as a catalytic variable. Pre-1977, she has promise and a top 10 in Lost in France. Post-1977, the grainier timbre arrives. The first global smash, It's a Heartache, lands immediately thereafter, exhibiting country pop phrasing, but with a rasp that communicates injury and resilience. This timbral distinctiveness becomes, as it were, an index of authenticity in a radio context saturated with smoother voices. When she later meets Steinman, he identifies the husk as the perfect carrier for his maximalist writing. He frames Total Eclipse explicitly as a showpiece for that sound, with production scale, power station, E Street adjacent players constructed around it. The result is not merely a hit, it is an aesthetic and commercial proof that a perceived limitation can become a comparative advantage.
I'm curious about the initial public reaction. Did people hear her as like an imitation of Rod Stewart, or did they accept it as her own signature from the beginning?
We observe both comparison and acceptance. The press quickly reached for analogies. The female Rod Stewart, later, the female Meatloaf, which are reductive but from a signaling perspective, effective heuristics for new audiences. Critics, like all music, emphasize the inimitable quality and the way her voice conveys desperate, lovelorn intensity. Others, such as OMH Media, preferred her at full belt rather than restraint, while the Yorkshire Times, even late in her career, noted the tingling potency remaining on stage. Industry acceptance is unambiguous. Elite session players, top-tier producers from Steinman to Moroder and Desmond Child, and A&R decisions that place her on major soundtracks. The marketplace validated the sound at global scale. The comparisons faded into a shorthand descriptor rather than a dismissal. In conclusion on the first question, the post-surgery timbre, whether attributed to scarring, recovery choices, or that oft-told scream, became the hinge on which she pivoted from talented to iconic. Without it, the Steinman synergy and the specific emotional voltage of those choruses are difficult to imagine. Big question 2. Counterfactually, suppose the voice had not changed. In that universe, her 1970s RCA arc likely continues along smoother country pop and adult contemporary lines. She may have deepened work with producers akin to Alan Tarney, Jeff Lynne, or even Phil Collins, who were in consideration before Steinman. The repertoire profile might skew toward mid-tempo storytelling and AC radio, closer to Juice Newton or Sheena Easton trajectories than to operatic rock. It's a Heartache could still hit, but its distinctiveness would rely more on melody and less on vocal grain. And crucially, Steinman may not have identified her as the vehicle for total eclipse. That song, or one like it, could have been assigned elsewhere within his circle.
Can we maybe now look at collaborations in that alternate path? Without the rasp, who might she have aligned with artistically?
Reasonably, we can infer a stronger Nashville and adult contemporary orientation. Duets with country vocalists a la Vince Gill, whom she did duet with eventually, or writers like Diane Warren and Michael Bolton in a softer production envelope, which in fact appears on Hide Your Heart, but imagine it as the dominant mode rather than a transitional moment. Producer pairings with David Foster or Humberto Gatica, which he later realized on Free Spirit, might have arrived earlier and defined her 1980s rather than her mid-1990s. In Europe, the Dieter Bohlen phase might still occur, but with less blues grit and more pristine pop polish. The radio math might favor consistency over spikes. All of this is, of course, conditional. The industry is stochastic, but the plausible equilibrium without the rasp is fewer Wagnerian climaxes and more steady AC rotation. In conclusion on the counterfactual, the career would likely remain successful, but different in contour. Fewer culture-defining crescendos, more incremental adult contemporary charting, and perhaps less of the cross-market mythos that an eclipse, a hero, and a thunderous chorus conferred. Big question 3. Present legacy. Today, her standing rests on several pillars. First, 2 truly massive singles, It's a Heartache and Total Eclipse of the Heart, whose cumulative sales and streaming continue to introduce new listeners. Second, the template for the power ballad is theater, where the vocalist's grain is a narrative device. Third, a European strategy in the 1990s that demonstrates how regional optimization can be more rational than Anglophone hegemony. Fourth, periodic revivals via event-synchronized performances and bilingual reframings, from the 2017 Eclipse spike to the 2003 French number one to the 2025 EDM pop interpolation together. Debates persist about late career timbre, whether age-weathered restraint diminishes or enriches affect, but the essential consensus is that the voice remains a distinctive instrument, on stage and on record.
What comes to mind next is younger listeners. Do they perceive her mostly through the memeable hooks, or as a full album artist? And does the French and German success translate to their playlist today?
In simpler terms, access channels shape perception. Younger audiences frequently encounter her via signature tracks embedded in social and broadcast events, eclipse tie-ins, film and television sync lineage of holding out for a hero, and through contemporary collaborations that bridge eras, such as the Guerra and Hypaton production, using her own lyric DNA. From there, algorithmic discovery exposes bitter blue era cuts in markets where those songs were once ubiquitous. As for research needs, we would benefit from systematic analyses of event-driven catalog surges, cross-lingual duet efficacy in francophone territories, and qualitatively, interviews tracing her cited influences, Janis Joplin, Tina Turner, to their echoes in today's singers. We might also test, with machine listening tools, how RASP correlates with perceived emotional intensity across demographics.
So, I guess that kind of sums it up. Her legacy feels both specific, the voice, the Steinman drama, and portable, because she kept recontextualizing herself across languages, producers, and even a solar eclipse.
To summarize, Bonnie Tyler's chronology is a sequence of smart pivots around a singular timbre: Chapel to clubs, Gaynor to Bonnie, RCA to Steinman to Bolan, country pop to operatic rock to Europop to orchestral covers, to collaborations that reignite catalog. We asked three questions. Historically, the vocal change unlocked her defining work. Counterfactually, without it, we likely see a steadier but less mythic arc. Presently, her legacy endures in mega singles, regional mastery, and event-synced revivals, with open lines of research on influence and reception. For further study, consider adjacent figures in the 1980s ecosystem: Jim Steinman's writer-producer universe, or peers like Tina Turner, whose careers also reveal the geometry of voice, brand, and market. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, and all the best with your studies and listening this week.